Okay, hello and welcome to Ty and Joe Go to the Dogs. I'm Ty.
I'm Joe.
And we are excited you're here. And for those actually watching this on video, yes, we do need some sort of art behind us. It looks awful. The glare like hits that thing, like the paint.
It's a problem we're aware of.
We're aware of it. We're working on it. If anyone has some art, feel free to send it over. Now, before we get into today's podcast, we're going to talk about socialization today. I need to ask you, because I've been talking about this all weekend with everybody, and I'm trying to evangelize here. Have you seen Taken 3?
Haven't.
No? Have you seen Taken 2?
Yeah.
Taken 1?
Yeah.
Okay. So you know the movie's Taken, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's something at the very end of Taken 3 that makes me want to scream. I keep thinking about it, and I this is very undog related, but I'm really just trying to get the message out there to a lot of people. And so I figure the people listening to our podcast need to know this. So you've seen the previews. You know that this movie's out, right?
Right.
Now, are you okay if I tell you something at the end? It's not like a spoiler alert, because if you've seen the previews, you know exactly what's going to happen. Can I tell you?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, if you're listening at home and you don't want to hear this, feel free to lower the volume for a little bit. But I've been thinking about this, even though it's not dog related, I have to bring this up. So, in this movie, as you can probably guess, Liam Neeson, he goes out there and he murders like a heck of people. He like tons of stolen property, tons of property damage. He's doing some stuff to get some. Wait, what's he doing? Is it revenge? I don't know. He's doing something. Clear his name, maybe?
Yeah.
I'm actually forgetting the plot. It's a fun movie. It's like worth watching. But anyways, so at the very end, he's sitting down with this police lieutenant, right? And one thing that he's done is he's investigating something throughout the way, and he hacked into the police computers to do that, right?
Okay.
So he did that, and then later he like murdered all these dudes, stole all this stuff. In fact, like, again, this isn't that big of a spoiler, but right before he's sitting down with the police lieutenant, he stole this Porsche or something. He ran it into an airplane, busted out. So he's done some stuff. So he's at the very end. This is the recap. This is where we're like, oh, you, Liam Neeson. And he's sitting down with the police lieutenant, Forrest Whitaker. And Forrest says to him, oh, it looks like you like hacked into our systems. We could arrest you for that, you know. And I just like threw up my hands and I'm like, what writer wrote that? This dude just murdered all these people. He took some people out. He just ran into a plane. And he's telling him, I'm going to arrest you for hacking into the police computer. Anyways, you have to see this. Now you have to see it so that you can revel with me in laughing. I'm not getting much of a reaction out of Joe right now. But I'm really having to evangelize right now so that people know that this kind of stuff can't happen. Hollywood needs to hear from us.
We're going to do our part.
Okay. So if you've seen this movie, spread the word. Facebook, Twitter. Let us know. Let people know that this just isn't acceptable. Excuse me. I've been trying to get over a cough for some time now. I will try to keep that to a minimum. So we're going to talk today about socialization. I think socialization is one of the most misunderstood things in dog training. Do you agree with that? I mean, have you thought about this before?
Yeah, definitely one of them. It's up there. So, common mistakes. We've talked about this before on this program. Is people just do lots of it.
Mm-hmm.
Just too much that's not good, basically.
Mm-hmm. So what kind of inspired me to want to talk about it is I got an email this morning. Now this is a woman. She's bringing her dog from pretty far away, actually. She's driving 4 hours here this week. No, soon, next weekend, to bring us her dog for our boot camp training. And so I won't tell her name or anything, but she emailed me this morning. It really got me thinking about socialization and how it's very often misunderstood. She said this last month, so our dog's 2, he keeps jumping on people since last month. Also, a male vet tried to check towards his privates, and the dog growled at him. He's never done that before, growled at someone, and he was nervous. I'm worried about fear aggression towards males. I've had him since he was 2 months, and he's been around males, but maybe not enough. I'm not sure what the issue is. I want to socialize him more, but it's a catch-22 because he pulls like crazy on the leash. And then she goes on to say some more things. But so anyways, I emailed back and kind of gave her my take on socialization But it kind of started with the fact of what socialization actually is. And my experience, and maybe it's your experience as well, and this isn't a critique of anyone, but just kind of out there, this is what I hear a lot of people talk about socialization, is they say, you know, we get our dog around a ton of stuff, he's socialized. And you'll hear people even say that as if it's like this foregone thing. Oh, he's socialized. Like it's something that's done now. He's socialized. Or like in her case, she's saying, you know, we got around a ton of guys. I don't know why he would do this. So when you hear something like that, what's your take?
Oh, well, I always assume that people overestimate what they've done with a dog. I don't know if that's always the case, but yeah, sometimes I think, okay, you haven't quite done that much.
Mm-hmm.
But also, I think how many of those, what are the percentage of those was a good experience for the dog? What was a growing experience? Because you can have somebody that's overly like rough with the dog. That can be bad socialization. So in that situation, before you even get to the vet's office, like you want to do a couple of things and kind of push the envelope a little bit for the dog, and then guide the dog when they're in the situation. So is that kind of where you're going?
It is, and I think that's the most critical part that we're talking about is the guiding of the dog.
Yeah.
I think there's this big common misconception that that exposure is socialization.
Right.
That I got this dog here, therefore he was socialized that Saturday morning.
Right. So it's a component, but it's only one of the components.
And that's exactly, well, what did I write back? I said something like that. Let me see what I wrote back to her. And I wrote back, socialization is often misunderstood. One thing I'm preaching about a lot is that exposure isn't socialization. And then I say, well, it's an aspect of socialization, kind of like you're mentioning, but sometimes not the most critical. The best socialization involves three key components. Volume, meaning the dog does meet a lot of things. Variety, lots of types of things. So that is exposure. So exposure is a part of it.
Right.
But then the third part is control. And then I write, you know, it's the control aspect that is often forgotten or not done. A dog who gets exposure but doesn't have the obedience and leadership necessary will often feel a lot of stress, regardless of the amount of exposure they've had. And so then I go on to tell her how we're going to help her with that. But what does that make you think of?
Oh, that rings exactly true, and it helps to hear things that way because it simplifies, you know, the issues for us and helps us classify what the problem is here. So when people are looking at that, they can make sure, okay, I've got the variety. I just need to control the dog in that situation.
Control the dog and control the environment, I would say.
Right.
You know, there's those two aspects, and that's why we're always telling people stay away from dog parks because there is no control there. You know, you're going to find bad dogs, good dogs, aggressive dogs, passive dogs, and that's not a good environment to be putting a dog in because you don't have control over the outcome. And so, in any case, yeah. I think it's important for people to understand that just getting your dog there is enough. So I've never actually used this term, but it just kind of popped in my head. So I think you can think of things in terms of positive socialization and negative socialization. You know, positive pushing forward, negative moving back. So let's say you do have a dog that's like anxious or something, and you take him somewhere, and he gets stressed, and he doesn't know how to resolve that stress. According to how a lot of people would define socialization, he was socialized. He went to that PetSmart puppy group class on Saturday morning. He was socialized. But his whole time there, he was stressed out.
Yeah, he was hiding under a chair.
Exactly. And so, you know, that socialization is negative. You know, it actually takes from his ability to process stress. Is that making sense? Or?
Yeah, absolutely. Or, I mean, it gets one of these, gets into one of these behaviors, like it goes into escape, so it hides under its mom's feet, and she pets the dog the whole time it's under there. And then it learns, like, when you're afraid, you just run to mom, and mom's going to make it better. So yeah, I mean, I see that specific thing all the time. So
let me ask you this. What role do you think genetics has in the socialization process?
So nature versus nurture. I think it has the majority role. I would say, you know, 60% of what you're looking at as a dog comes from what it was, you know, given at birth. But like, having said that, you can really make a lot of changes on a dog. So if they start out afraid of men, but the only time they get fed is when they see men, you can take them a long ways. Now, the thing about that, doing conditioning with a dog that already has those genetics, is it's not super effective, because as soon as you change a variable, you step backwards on progress. So we can take a dog, we can get him around a bunch of kids, but then you bring in a kid on a skateboard, it changes everything. Get them used to skateboards, and they do really good at the skate park, but when you introduce that out of the blue, it's a new thing, so you have to get them used to that. And that's where I would say, like, leadership and boundaries and roles like that, having some impulse control on the dog kind of helps out.
And I think that is the biggest, most huge part, is that leadership and is that structure that is so often just missed when people are socializing their dog.
Yeah. Is
they get the exposure, maybe they get a lot of volume, a lot of variety, but they don't have that structure, that control. And so it really, you know, like I say, a lot of people, in fact, I just got off the phone probably an hour ago. I was talking with a woman with a little Schnauzer, and she says, I know that he was beat when he was young. Oh, and I asked, how did you know that? You know, did the rescue tell you that? She's like, no, just how he acts. And I told her, maybe he was. You know, who knows? You know, we don't know for sure. It sounds like you don't have the exact history on him. So maybe he was. But quite often we see dogs with huge fear issues that cower, that run away, that were never beaten. Yeah. Do you think that's mostly genetics, or do you think that's mostly like incorrect socialization or a lack of socialization?
Man, I think it's a problem, and it just compounds when you put the two together. When you have a dog that is weak-nerved, or a dog that has a lot of anxiety, and you socialize it, you can have a pretty basically normal dog. You know, that same dog will, you know, again, you put it in a new situation, you'll have to get it used to that specific situation. But you can take a dog with weak nerves quite a ways. When you start out with strong nerves, I feel like the stronger the nerve of the dog, the less you have to socialize. I mean, it's always good to. So the more defensive dogs, you have to socialize more. That's kind of how I feel. So if you take a very strong nerve dog and socialize it a lot, I think the end product's a dog that is bomb-proof. You can do a lot around it. So I feel like they just really go together. And I don't know what the trade-off is. I know there's certain periods that you have to know. So if you see your dog starting to be afraid of stuff, socialization becomes more important during those fear periods. It's something that, how you talked about before, owners will get confident. Okay, my dog's socialized. Well, they might not even know it because they get busy with another part of their life, but their dog enters another fear period, or it develops this fear because it perceived that something bad happened, in the situation. So it's a never-ending process. But I don't know, what's stronger, genetics or socialization.
Well, you brought up something that I want to touch on for a second. You said that the stronger the nerve dog, the stronger the dog in general, the less socialization needed. So. Excuse me. So just to tell kind of this story, so about a decade ago, I worked at this company out in Boston, and what we would do is we would import dogs from Europe. These were really high-end German Shepherds and Belgian Malinois, occasionally a Doberman or a Rottweiler, but we would import these very, very well-bred dogs, very strong, and they have been bred for generations to do police work or to do military work or search and rescue or home protection or sport or a variety of things.
Right.
But they've been bred for that purpose. And of course, anytime that happens, you get a stronger nerve dog, because you can't put a weak nerve dog on a police force. And so those dogs don't get bred. The only dogs being bred are the strong nerve dogs.
Right.
That doesn't mean all of their progeny is going to be strong nerved. Two strong nerve dogs can create a dog with a weak nervous system, right? But anyway, so I remember, so we would import these dogs and we'd start training them, of course, and we would usually import them at a year, 2 years old, 3 years old sometimes. So these were already adult dogs, and so we'd get to work with them, and very quickly, the skills that these dogs had, the ability these dogs had was really incredible. They could do things that other dogs would be terrified of. Gunshots, they don't care. Walking across slippery surfaces, they don't care. jumping into this or jumping off of that. They don't care. Whereas the average family pet would be terrified of doing a lot of these things.
Right.
So I remember one time, just marveling at how strong nerve these dogs were. I mentioned to my boss, I said something like, wow, man, these guys meaning these owners of the dogs when they're in Europe, they must do a ton of socialization. These dogs are so sound everywhere we go. We take them downtown, they're sound. We take them to the pet store, they're sound. We do this, they're sound. Very sound dogs. They must do a ton of socialization. And he kind of laughed at me. He's like, what are you talking about? I was like, well, look how sound they are. Look at everything they can do. And he said, these European dudes, they're old school. They'll take, the dog lives in a kennel. He goes out to the training club once or twice a week. He comes home to the kennel. These dogs don't get socialized. It's rare that they get socialized. And so for me, and later on I was able to go to Europe and, a little bit and see a little bit more of what he was talking about. Those dogs are bred from such strong nerves that they don't need as much. Like you mentioned, that they can have a few experiences, and here comes a brand new experience. I don't care. I'm, mentally that tough that it doesn't bother them. And so I think a lot of people unfortunately overlook that when they're getting a dog.
Yeah.
Now, rescuing a dog is great. Rescue dogs do that. But a lot of people, when they're looking to get a dog from a breeder, are like, ooh, we've heard this a million times. I only paid $100 for this dog.
Oh.
And the dog's, a genetic mess. He's health problems, emotional problems, nervous system issue problems.
Or they got the dog out of pity because it was the one that was hiding in the back of the litter box or the whelping box.
Yeah. Yeah, so they saved this money on this dog. But, what they got was a dog that they're behind the 8 ball from the beginning.
Yep.
They have to do all of this work and all this socialization just to hopefully get to a point where, the dog can be fairly normal in public and around people and other dogs and things like that. And so, let me ask you another question here. Does socialization stop? A lot of people get worried about that.
No, the need definitely lessens as the dog gets older, but I wouldn't say it stops. Our lives are always so dynamic that everything's always changing. So what may be a circumstance in your life now, it won't be in a while. Whereas something that you don't have now will pop up later. Having said that, I do feel that there's critical windows of when you can, when the socializing is really powerful. So I think if you do a lot with a dog, your average American pet dog, it's going to socialize, it's going to take to something new that much better when it's older. So.
Do you put any time limits on when those windows are?
Well, so I think there are lots of time limits, but I think everybody has their own opinion. So for me, I bred a litter of dog once. So litter of puppies. I had a really nice female. Her health was awesome. Temperament was awesome. And we bred these dogs. By the time they left my house, I kept them for 11 weeks. By the time they left the house, they had come into contact with 70 different adult humans.
Yeah.
So I did a lot of work. This litter, whole litter almost, all but 1 or 2 dogs turned out to be crap. So yeah. I had high hopes. I did the early neurological stimulation, the Super Puppy program, socialized them, took them everywhere, did minimal vaccine protocols, and I wasn't very impressed with the outcome. So looking back, I found some weakness on the stud, but I feel like I got the puppies into a lot of good homes. They really tried, they tried hard to do what they could with their puppies and do it within, because I stuck with these families. I said, okay, I want you to do this at this point and this at this point. They stuck with it, and it was a little bit of a letdown. But these dogs had some problems to start with. So had they done that with healthy dogs, I feel like it would have. It would have taken them a little further.
Yeah, so it's the nature and the nurture, and that's that's the thing and that's the thing a lot of people don't realize. Really good breeders put a lot of effort into finding the right animals, and you did, But even then, sometimes it doesn't always work out perfectly.
Yeah, and you can't really blame someone who's putting all that, that effort into getting the right dog. And there was no cost savings anywhere, so.
Yeah, and that's the thing where you've got to be careful, because one thing I hear a lot is like, oh, well, the dad was a therapy dog and the mom was a search and rescue dog.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, were they really, or did he once go to a hospital and they called him a therapy dog, and stuff like that. And so there's a lot that goes into choosing the right dog. That's a podcast for a different day. But yeah, sometimes things don't work out great. I had a puppy once that came from 2 amazing parents. And that puppy turned out really nice, and then his brothers and sisters didn't,
Right.
And I think I did raise it better because I was the only professional dog trainer raising the puppies. And so I raised it better than everyone else did. But even then, some of the other puppies had issues that, were a little bit surprising, that you couldn't really chalk it up to their socialization and their upbringing, per se.
Yeah.
I've always, I remember hearing, and this was, now 20 years ago when I first got into dogs, the first dog trainer I ever worked for back when I was in high school, he always said that there's this window up until about 6 months of age. And I don't think that's a set. I think, now having seen thousands of dogs, I think that's a pretty good rule of thumb.
Right.
But from a neurological level, from, a physiological level, I'm probably using the wrong words here, but from that base, level, there's a certain time in a child, in a puppy, in whatever, where there's a lot of brain matter being formed and neural pathways and neurons being formed and things like that, that if the socialization occurs during that point, it is that much more meaningful.
Right.
And so that's where I've always heard that, and do believe to this day, I don't know if there's any studies behind this, I'm sure there are, but, puppies that have the proper socialization done, up until about 6, 7, 8 months of age, that's huge. It's not like you stop at that point, but that's your window to really get as much done as possible, right?
Agreed.
And so I think with kids, they say, have you ever heard this? Some of my client told me this, that they found the same thing to be true with kids, but it's up until about 5 years of age.
Yeah.
You've heard that?
Yeah.
And so it's not that you can't socialize a child that's 12. It's just that it's more difficult. There's more baggage that's kind of set in there. Mm-hmm. And so the idea is to do the best socialization possible when they're young.
Right.
Boy. So before we finish up here, any parting thoughts on socialization?
Yeah, my parting thought would be I really want to give my dog feedback on how he's reacting to a situation. So if I need to redirect, then that's one thing. But if they're nervous about something, again, we've talked about this before. I don't want to nurture the highs or the lows. If they're overly hyper or afraid, don't give them affection. Mm-hmm. on the control part of the socialization. But once we get a dog and we get into the nitty gritty and we're working with these situations, I want to really, like, if I get eye contact from that dog in the face of a set of circumstances where they'd usually be aggressive, and I'm getting focused, I want to say, good boy, good boy, good boy. Mm-hmm. And as soon as they look away from me and start to snowball into an aggressive behavior, give them a correction, leave it, refocus them, good boy. So I'm either saying, yes, I love it, or no, I don't like that, do something else. When a dog gets a lot of feedback from the owner in those situations when they're socializing, I think they're going to try hard to please the owner because they know how to, they know when they are doing it. And when you get those two together on an animal that naturally, dogs naturally want to please us, you get that dog moving towards what the owner wants. So.
And I think that's huge. And just to build on that even more, the dog is going to get feedback no matter what.
Right.
And so it's going to come from you or it's going to come from the environment. So when you're socializing that dog and exposing it to new things with volume, variety, and control, somebody's going to be giving that dog feedback. Yeah. You go into that group of you go into Home Depot and there's a shopping cart and it's a little bit scary because it's got a squeaky wheel. And that's the only feedback the dog gets is that's scary, and sure enough it's still there. Yeah. We start to maybe develop a problem. But if you're giving feedback like, okay, I understand that you're a little bit nervous of that squeaky wheel, but I need you to pay attention to me, or pay attention to sitting, or pay attention to heeling, or whatever. You get that dog some different feedback. You can really start to make some changes. Preemptive changes. That's not the right word, but preemptive progress.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I feel like you program them to pay attention to you in those situations.
Yeah, that might sound a little bit like Orwellian programming the dog, but that's really what we're doing.
Right.
At the end of the day, we're programming the dog. When you experience a shopping cart, here's how I want you to react. When you experience a dog, here's how I want you to react. And again, if we're not the ones programming, then the environment is.
Right.
And the environment typically will do an awful job because the environment is set up for domestic humans. TVs and couches and cars, these are all domestic human stuff. Yeah. It's not domestic dog stuff. So if the dog was left out in the wild and the environment was teaching him or her, maybe that's going to be a different story. But when your dog is living in parks and pet stores and veterinary offices and homes and walking on the street, that environment will almost never teach your dog something good. It all needs to come from you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
Cool.
Yeah, I want to insert myself as much as possible.
Exactly. Yeah, we want to be a big part of that dog's. We want to make sure that just about every experience the dog has ends in a positive.
Yep.
Even if there was a negative somewhere, that we can pull the dog out of that and end in a positive, right?
Yeah.
Cool. Well, good. Well, thanks for listening today, folks. Make sure to head over to tietheDogGuide.com to get more podcasts and more information on training your dog. Head over to Transform Your Dog in 60 Days to see about the new program that we're putting out there and the $5,000 challenge that we're doing. And then, of course, head over to iTunes, give us a rating, let us know how awesome we are and how epic Joe's new beard is. That beard's coming in, man.
Thank you.
Looking good. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you next week.
Thanks.